Thanks for joining us on Bobbye Tonilee Unplugged, where the message is always truthful, authentic, and inspiring. For more information on Bobbye Tonilee Unplugged, visit bobbyeandtonilee.com. Now your hosts, Bobbye and Tonilee.
When we see clients every day, they come in and say, I just want to help people. We hear that over and over, and you're in the same thing. So when you say empowering women, I want to see what that is, not just hear what that is. But all of you, when you went through what you do, you want to help people. John Mathieson, he's a dear friend of mine, and primarily because I found myself in a crisis situation. My other two kids were in college. But my ex-husband was extremely helpful. He filled out all their paperwork. He did all the work to get them to college. And now I found myself in a situation that I'm responsible for my last child. And the only reason why she even wanted to go to college was to play volleyball. Otherwise, she didn't want to go to college. I don't want to go to college. So I'm saying, okay, I'm going to go with the volleyball thing then, because I want her to go to college, okay? And I did not know what to do. I did not know who to turn to. So an answer to my prayer was John Mathieson, and he's with Perfect College Match. And he came to me, and we knew that Ellie could not play in Southern California. She wasn't a D1 player, which I didn't even know what any of that meant. But he came in, and he just sat down, and he said, listen, this is your opportunity to go across any landscape of the United States. We needed to have someone who specified in that. And Ellie ended up going to Chicago, and she loves her school. It was such an answer to prayer. We did not have to fill out one application. It couldn't have been any easier, but it was because I was on my knees crying for the Lord to help me to help her. All right? And the reason why I say that is because just because you might not be in, quote, ministry, does not mean that you are not doing ministry in your heart's desires. Because God has given you gifts so that you can do a work, so that you can bear fruit. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want to write that down because we're going to talk about Matthew 25. God gives gifts, okay? So that we can do a work, or Ephesians 2, 8, and 9 call it, we are his work, right? Workmanship. And that really means poema, or that we're his precious poem, that he's writing it all together, so that we can bear fruit. And fruit has a couple of different ways. Fruit, it could be the love, joy, peace fruit. We know those, right? Love, joy, peace, patience. Bobbye says I always forget the patience when I always end up with 8 instead of 9 fruits. She goes, you forgot patience. Oh yeah, patience, that's the 4th one. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness. Yes. Okay, so we go down to 9. And then fruit can also be fruit like the verse in Ecclesiastes 11:1, cast your bread on the water, and what comes back is what you should multiply in. So fruit can be something that does yield money, all right? And fruit can also be something that brings encouragement or empowerment, or really provides a service to others, like what John Mathieson did for me at that time. So John Mathieson could say, I'm not in ministry. But if I'm sitting there praying for God to help me, and I know the answer isn't that I'm going to go figure out the difference between applying to UCSD versus applying to a San Diego State, then suddenly the answer to my prayer becomes a John Mathieson, who then is going to bear fruit in his life by providing a service to me. So he has a gift, and he does a work, which is PCM. His gift is communication with colleges, right? Not everybody can do that. That's a gift. Communication with college. His work is the structure of what he has, and his fruit is not only is he hopefully doing it with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, because this is where we get the eternal benefit, but he also can make money at it so he can continue to do it. And he provides a service that answers other people's prayers. All right, so yesterday I was answering the phone for a radio show, and Ader DeMello was on our radio show. And whenever Eddie plays Ader's show, he gets at least 5 to 6 calls. And he literally calls them back right away. He's praying with them all. What Ader does is landscaping. So he'll do indigenous plants. Did I say that right? Yeah, he had to tell me what that meant because I was showing him cactus and he goes, no. That's not it, TL. It's not the cactus. Oh, okay. So indigenous plants, he does fountains and he does rock sculptures in the backyard, like to have a place where you can find peace with God to pray. I'm actually going to have him come to my house. And so we were getting call after call after call, and I was like his secretary saying, okay, I'll have him call you. Okay, I'll have him call you. Okay, I'll have him call you. And then the last call that came in was a man who sells cell phones. And he said, okay, I'm listening to this guy on rock sculptures on your radio show, but you women also do some sort of business thing, don't you? And I said, yes, that's why Ader's a client. And he said, well, I know that you are in ministry, but my ministry is my job. And I said, well, do you think that our ministry is not our everyday job, which is media for women? And he said, no, your ministry is serving the Lord. And I said, are you not serving the Lord in selling cell phones? He said, of course I am. I pray about, like, so now he's like, I have flipped this. He's so uptight. And I said, we are here because we really believe we are an answer to people's prayers, because the landscape has changed from newspaper, print, and television and radio ads to an online virtual world. And you need a comprehensive plan. So yes, we do television commercials, and yes, we have a radio show, but you also need to figure out how to make it online. And he said to me, if I don't get online, I will not have a business. And I thought, that's exactly what Bobbye says. You've called the right person. So I was excited to talk to him, though, because I thought, you know what? There is this misconception that unless you're in the ministry, you're not doing a work of God. It's not, that is not true. And I liked the verse Amanda spoke on about having many counselors. If those counselors know the Lord, they are accountable to God for what they are saying to you and doing for you and the kind of fruit that they're bearing. And so we have to work together as a team, but we have to start by seeing that our individual roles are appointed by the Lord. So yeah, you might not have John Matheson's gifts. You might not have my gifts. You might say, well, I can't do that. No, you're not called to do that. Do what you're called to do. And if you have your Bibles, which we didn't tell anyone to bring their Bibles, but if you have your Bibles, you could also go to your phone. We're going to go to Matthew 25, and I'm just going to briefly share a very common passage, but I've been thinking about it so often because we do these amazing, one-day events that are all about ministry and bringing your heart back to the Lord. But it's not only about living in the heavenlies. We hear that saying, you're so heavenly minded, you know earthly good. Or you're so earthly minded, you know heavenly good. And at some point, we have to be good for both. We have to take the things that God has given us and be faithful in them so that we are earthly good and heavenly minded. Okay? So in Matthew 25, it's the parable about the talents. And we know it, but I just want you to see a couple of words. In verse 14, for it will be like a man going on a journey who called to his servants. That's a job, right? They're servants. They have a job. And entrusted to them his property. We are all servants of the Lord, or we are servants in a job in some way. If you're an entrepreneur, you're a servant to other people in the service that you're providing, because we remember that we're accountable to God, okay? So, as a servant, God has, here's the key word, entrusted us with gifts, or another word is talents. Does that make sense? Your talents are your gifts, because God has given you the ability to, quote, empower women, have given you the ability to, quote, get a child into college, have given you the ability to do video production. Those are gifts. So he's entrusted you with a talent. Verse 15, to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability. That verse is written the same exact way that Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 12 and 14, that the Spirit distributes gifts according to their ability. So you are not called to compare yourself to anybody else. You are not to say, well, it's so unfair that Amanda comes up to their office and can get Bobbye for an hour at a time to finish her website when I live in Ventura and can't get to her. You know what I mean? You're not to compare yourself like that. You are accountable to the Lord for the gifts he's given you to do what you need to do. And he has given you a source of resources to get to where you need to be too. All right. Then he went away. And he who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 more talents. And it goes to the 2 talents, and then it goes to the 1 talent. And so then the master comes back after a long time, that's verse 18, and in verse 20, and he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I've made 5 more talents. And the master said, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. If you look at these passages, then in verse 23, again, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. Key words here are faithful, which is a fruit, right? You have been faithful. Enter into the joy. All right? Now, both of them made money in this, and whatever that money went for was, they ended up being encouraged and even empowering their master, right? Okay, so when you see the talents that you have, the goal is that you keep going. The problem that we have here is, and I say this all the time, but instead of going forward to see what God is going to bless, we start going outward. We start saying, well, I'm not really sure if this is what we're supposed to be doing because it's not going fast enough. So maybe I need to do this too. Or maybe I need to do that too. There's nothing wrong with doing this and that, but just make sure they don't become distractions. Because if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. Okay? So you don't want to be distracted along the way. And let me tell you, the one thing that all 3 of these had to deal with was time. And that comes in this work part. So you have talents, then you have time. And the key word that the master says is, were you faithful over time with what I entrusted you to do? Now, Bobbye and I are the best examples of people running around in circles, okay? Because when we first started, we were in the church. And she immediately started branching out from the church. So I'm saying, no, I just want to stay in the church forever. I'm called to be in the church. I've been in the church, so I just want to stay in the church, and I want to be faithful in the church. That's it. Bobbye said, but what we're doing isn't from the church. Firstly, we're volunteers. So we're not on staff. So it's not like what we're doing is as a result of being paid, okay? She's saying we're writing Bible studies, so I'm going to trademark the Bible studies. And then we have I'm praying to get on radio. She doesn't want to get on radio, but the next thing you know, we're on radio. Well, that's not in the church. So we're still going forward with the same heart's desire, but we do notice that we're coming off. The difference is we're not going backwards. It's the same heart's desire that's moving forward. Do you see that? Like I'm saying, no. It's just going to be the church, the church, the church. And so at the radio show, we're telling people to come to the church. The Bible studies were saying, come to the Bible study at the church. That was the platform. But our heart's desire was to help women, empower women, help them walk with God, help them to fulfill their callings, figure out what their talents are and what their gifts are so that they can go forward. So when over time, okay, we have these talents that we can speak, we can write, we're watching those branch off, but we're faithful to go forward with our heart's desire. Over time, the pastor called us in and said, you need to choose between all these other things out here, the radio show, the conferences, the writing, all that, versus just teaching this Bible study. And Bobbye and I both said, well, you don't understand. It's because we're doing all these things that the Bible study is growing, and that is growing your church. And he said, but I feel like it's a distraction to my church. So I want you to choose. So we said, now this was really hard for me. The Lord had already told Bobbye this. Bobbye was telling me, TL, you've got to see we're growing beyond this. No, Bobbye, we can save the church the rest of our life. No, this is best. I have 3 little kids. I want to raise them in this church. TL, I don't think, God's not telling me we're staying in this church. No. But when push came to shove, I was the one that said, but my heart is for women everywhere. I'm a volunteer here. I'm not called just to serve this church. I'm called to help women. And the church really does deal with family, like it's a lot of things. So I said, I guess we're going to have to leave. Well, what did I do at this point? I cried. I cried so much. I cried for months. I did. I just cried. I felt like I had no purpose, no place. Maybe we're doing the wrong thing. What are we supposed to do? And that's when you have to reassess. When you hit those crisis points, which is why Donna was actually up on the panel, because she hit that point in her life, that she got to the point that she said, I know I'm supposed to counsel. I know I've been doing this for my parents since I was 12. I took the overflow. And so, but she hit a crisis point of, but God, you didn't make this just work out easy. How come? And she had to face the fact that she had a choice if she was going to do this or not. This wasn't just going to be, oh, it's going to be ministry because my parents are pastors and I just do. No, is she going to get paid for this? Is she going to be faithful to this? Is this going to be not about her parents anymore, but about her calling? And when she hit that point, it was right here. Are you going to remain faithful to what God has called you to do from your heart, taking the gifts and continuing on despite the crisis? So now, as I look at Bobbye and I, then Media for Women comes up. And I'm like, no, we can't do Media for Women. No, that can't be. We're in ministry. And I realized that my heart is still the same, helping women. My talents that God's entrusted us is still the same. Everything we were doing for the ministry, now we can help women do for their ministries, for their jobs, for their ability to encourage and empower and to provide a service so that they can make money, so that they can bear fruit that's not only eternal, but on this earth. And I realized that the greatest message of all is helping people today walk out their calling, because that calling is what they are accountable to God for. So what is the difference between ministry and calling? And that's how I'm going to end this. Okay? Ministry is Colossians 3. Whatever you do as unto the Lord. So if I'm in the grocery store and I'm saying to the Lord, Lord, I'd really like to talk to that person about Christ, because they have those kids that are screaming and crying, and I've been in that situation too, and I know how bad that is. Me now, shopping at the grocery store has become ministry, because everything I do, I have an intentional thought to please the Lord. That has become ministry. A calling is when you have realized over time the areas that God has given you this desire that even though you hate it at times, you can't stop doing it. That's calling. Ministry is opening the door for people who are disabled, saying hello and looking at someone in the eyes, saying to someone, I remember going into a bank to open an account, and I ended up leading her to Christ because I saw that she was crying, and instead of it being about opening the account, it became about her. That is ministry. Calling is, regardless of how much I hate this at times, I can't do anything else. So Lord, you're going to have to help me, because I know you are beating me down, because the more holes that I have in this broken vessel, the greater I can shine for you, and you will get the glory for this. And it does not matter if you have the title minister, if you have the title of an employee at the church. It matters where you are in your heart, because God has put each of us in places to be a light to the world. And we do ministry every day, but our calling we are accountable to God for. And you can be an attorney, and that is your calling to help people. My brother, in closing, he started out as a criminal defense attorney. Oh my, you have no idea how our Italian family beat him up for that. How can you are compromising your faith? You are not a Christian. You are, and it's that saying that says, if you don't condemn it, you condone it. So we were so instead of realizing there is no condemnation in Christ, we're just beating him up. And then one day he called me after being just abused by everyone in the family. And he said, sis, you teach Sunday school every week. Yes, I do. What if one of those parents accuse you of hurting their child? Who is going to defend you? Well, now I know people well enough to know that anything can become especially in this day and age, anything can become a legal issue. And I said, I never thought about that. He said, right, we live in America. everyone is has a right to a fair legal representation if they're guilty or innocent. He said, if they're guilty, I know it. Believe me, I know it. So before the Lord, I pray differently in how I'm going to represent them. But I am there for the person who is innocent. And he said, and you need to pray for me because I might someday represent you. And I realized right then, he is called by the Lord to do this. This is not ministry. This is a calling. And you're right. I am going to pray for him to do this. And I really do believe that everyone in this room, you are called to do what you have sat through mastermind classes to do, or what you are paying us for. Because you know that regardless of how much it hurts your heart, you have to still push forward. Even if you can't always define what you're doing, you're in a process of figuring it out, but you still go with your heart until the time starts showing you how you are providing encouragement, empowerment in the service. And it might change names from Church Bible Teacher to Daily Disciples Ministries to Media for Women, and then the whole thing ends up under one covering, which is Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged. So have we had to rebrand ourselves and change? Yes, but has our heart changed? Has our message changed? Has our focus changed? No. So give yourself the grace to rebrand yourself, but do not compromise the desire of your heart, even if you don't see the money yet. Even you're going to have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find the prince. But there will come a point that you become the princess, and you will have what you need if you stay faithful to the Lord. And that is the key word, faithful. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for tuning into Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged. Tune in every day on air and online. For more real life, real answers from Bobbye and Tonilee. Subscribe to the Bobbye and Tonilee channel, and for more information, visit bobbyeandtonilee.com.